Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my sarcastic buddy, Matt. Matt, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. So what all of our listeners just missed is in the lead up to pushing the record button here for our episode, Chatty Cathy has been just yakking our guest's ear off, trying to get us ready here. But I'm doing great. Mark's doing great. Our show is going to be great. So, Mark, everything's going well, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. You got a big race coming up, right?
Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get through it, and we'll move on. So
yeah, man. Big triathlon coming up, half iron distance, man. So exciting! You've been working your butt off, man. So I'm excited. So this will come out Friday, and you're racing on Sunday, right?
That is true.
All right, man. So everybody that's listening to this on Friday or Saturday, send Matt some positive vibes to get him through his half iron distance triathlon because he's trained his ass off, man. He's going to do great, but well wishes and good thoughts for you, Matt. No doubt about that, right?
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. All right. Hey, so no Barrel Society birthdays this week. So we can skip over that. And then I'll thank our sponsors as well. The Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky, making some great food. Chef Kyle Klatka doing a great job out there. Stop by and see those guys. Check them out online at the Stave, Kentucky, or on Instagram as well. But they got live music every Saturday night as well. They got that cool little treehouse deck out there by Glenn's Creek. Just check those guys out. You'll absolutely love it out there. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their sponsorship as well and the work that they're doing. Ari Sussman, just a great guy, master blender up there, doing a tremendous job with their products. So check them out online as well at 3chordbourbon.com or on Instagram, social media at 3 Chord Bourbon. With that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
I'd love to. So we are in the Bourbon Life Studios again, recording remotely. And tonight we have on the show Stu and Martin Janousek, the co-founders of Bespoken Spirits. Gentlemen, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot. Great to meet you guys.
Martin, did we get the last name right? That's the biggest question of the night.
I was actually surprised. Very good, Matt. Good job.
Oh, I did. Wow, I thought you were going to say.
I recognized it. So.
Well, that's good, man.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's right. I've been known to butcher a few names in the past, so we're happy we got that. we got that right. So, guys, so you're with Bespoken Spirits, and we're going to be drinking 3 different things tonight. So, if one of you guys would like to just take a minute, real quick. We have a bad tendency, like I said before we started recording, to forget about talking about what we're drinking. So if you guys don't care, just to start us off with this session with what it is we've got poured up for this first round.
All right, so we got actually three of our spirits. All of them, of course, whiskies. Right. We also make other spirits, but you have something that the first one, it's called our special batch. It's you recognize it on the pink label. And this one is a spirit that we did based on an inspiration from a Japanese whiskey, from one of my favorite whiskeys, actually a Scotch whiskey. And we kind of try to mimic here a recipe or a composition from an experience of this Japanese style whiskey. And it's actually made from bourbon mash. So which is common for all those 3 spirits. For this one and also the next spirit that you're gonna have. So spirit number 2 is, I believe, our straight whiskey. So it is our bourbon straight bourbon whiskey, which I won't even have it in front of me today. So I have to recall my memories because this stuff is so popular that because it won the double gold in San Francisco, so they don't give any bottles to me anymore. We ship everything, including to you guys. And then the third one is our Rye Whiskey, and I'm sure we're going to talk about in detail a little bit about the mash bill, etc. But this was the category winner at the World Whiskies Awards in whenever it was February or March.
Okay. So getting back to this first one here, this is your whiskey that's distilled from a bourbon mash. So can you talk a little bit about, well, let's talk about what the mash is first, if you don't care. I'm confusing myself, but let's go back and talk about the mash. What are we looking at in terms of the mash on this one?
Yeah, so it's a 75% of corn, right? 21 rye, and then 4% of malt, right? And you might recognize this mash bill. We sourced the spirit from MGP, and the reason we call it a whiskey distilled from bourbon mash is because it was not in a new barrel. We only put it a couple of seconds into a neutral barrel. So that's why we, of course, technically can't call it a bourbon, and that's why the designation is a whiskey distilled from bourbon mash. And it will be interesting to see how you, from the nose, right? I don't know if you agree, right? It's very floral, it's very fruity, right? You get some of the age characteristics, right? And just to give you an idea, our process in this case took 3 days to make it. We don't add anything. We don't add any other additives other than the spirit and the wood, and it takes us about 3 days to get to the spirit. And again, this was designed to mimic a Japanese style whiskey. Of course, there's no such real thing like a Japanese style whiskey. I have to say that too, but just because, it reminded me so of one of my favorite whiskeys.
It might be worth just pausing for a second and maybe rewinding a bit, Mark, to give a little bit of context on the company and what kind of sets us apart. Because you're sampling three of our products today, but it's 3 of 20 billion different combinations that we have the recipes to create. We've developed technology to deliver craft maturation, to apply the same care and consideration to maturation that's historically gone into distilling, and to be able to provide precision control to the maturation process. So we can start with a source spirit, and then by carefully selecting the pieces of wood we use small pieces of wood called microstaves, and creating different blends and mixtures of microstaves, and then controlling the environment that the microstave and the source spirits react in, we're able to deliver very precise aroma, color, and taste profiles.
Gotcha. Okay. And we're going to stop. We won't go any further because we'll talk about that more in the second session. I think we'll get more in detail on that, but that explains it for our listeners so they understand what you're talking about. So this is basically whiskey that has been, it's not been aged in a barrel in a warehouse like a standard bourbon or a rye or other whiskey would normally be. It's a process that you all have created that I guess, I mean, would rapid aging, would that be a sufficient terminology, or is there something else that you would prefer to call it?
It's broader than that. And again, that's why I use the term craft maturation, because it's not about the speed. It's about the precision control. The fact that it does happen fast is extremely valuable because it allows us to have very fast learning cycles, which means we can experiment, learn, and revise very quickly to hone in on recipes that people love. It's about the craft. It's about the precision. It's about painstakingly sourcing the spirit and the wood and blending and crafting this microstave mixture, and then controlling the maturation process to get exactly what we want out of it.
Okay. Matt, you're going to jump in there.
So the feedback you're getting is so rapid that it's got to be invaluable to be able to change things to really dial in what you're looking for and what's going on, because you're putting something down, you're getting it, and we're drinking with a 3-day-old product here, so you're not waiting for 2 to 4 to 6 years while something sits up in a rick house to figure out if you really hit it or if that was a miss or not. So that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. We've produced probably 10 times as many spirits as there have been days that the company has been in existence.
Wow. So that's what I was going to ask you next, and we'll get to you guys because I want to talk about who you all are, but I want our listeners to understand what it is that we're actually drinking here. So this is a whiskey that was distilled in Indiana. You gave us the mash bill. This did not go into a brand new oak barrel, which is one of the requirements for our listeners at home. Most of you probably know that, but one of the primary requirements, of course, to be a bourbon whiskey is that it has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel. So this one did not go into a new charred oak barrel. So this went into a barrel of some form. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, that's correct. But literally just for seconds.
Just for okay. That's okay. That's what I wanted to make sure of. So, that's interesting. So you're talking the process. This was basically distilled whiskey processed by you all for 3 days. Is that accurate? I mean, is that fair? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Matt, you got the information, man. You got the whiskey. So you've been nosing it, man. What do you think?
The first thing I picked up on the nose was a really bright aroma of honey and some clover, and then it really led way to a lot of the floral qualities that you were talking about, Martin. I pick up a lot of orange blossom coming across on it as well. It's got a really nice, inviting, like kind of springtime sweet smell to it. I pick up the floral factors, some cherry blossom, orange. Orange really stands out to me.
Yeah, Matt, it's funny because as soon as I poured it, I thought, and I will say that this whiskey, the other ones we'll get to, but this one it looks light in the glass. Our listeners can't see. We don't record video, so they can't see this at all. But this does look very light. So I think, perceiving that and knowing that it's a very young whiskey, my thought process was this is going to taste similar to a white dog. That it's going to be a very young, corn forward. That's going to be very a burn, etc. And it's not. I mean, this does not smell anything like what you would think mash that just came off the still. I mean, or distillate that just came off the still at all. I mean, this smells like a whiskey that's been in a barrel for an extended period of time. So I'm really surprised. Like I said, this is the first. I've not opened these bottles until today. So, and this is the first whiff I've had. So. I don't know, Matt. You see the look of shock on my face? Maybe I don't know.
I think we're both in that, giving each other that look here. But let's get more into you, gentlemen. Here. So,
yeah, good idea. Yeah, tell us about you guys. I mean, what was it? Well, tell our listeners. We like our listeners to know about our guest. So if you can, just each of you take some time. Tell us about your background, what you did before the whiskey industry, and then how it was that you both ended up in the whiskey world. That'd be great.
And maybe I'll give you the first level story, and then Martin, obviously feel free to amplify. And a lot of people first heard about the company back late last year when we first launched to the public and opened the kimono and told folks what we were doing and announced our initial funding, and also the addition of baseball icon Derek Jeter to our team as an investor. And what they didn't realize was that the company actually started several years before that. When Martin first approached me about the idea. And Martin and I go back a long way. We're a couple of Silicon Valley engineers who, after I guess rather long careers in traditional tech, wanted to pair our tech backgrounds with something that we were a lot more passionate about, namely whiskeys. And we actually first met each other 15 years ago when we worked together and launched another sustainably focused company, which was a fuel cell company called Bloom Energy. Okay. And at Bloom, Martin ran kind of the deep, hardcore technology development, and I ran the marketing and the business development functions. And by those descriptions, you could probably guess that Martin is a materials scientist by training, and he is a foodie and a beverage lover by passion. Whereas I'm admittedly neither of those things. I'm the business guy, and I've got more of the everyman's taste. And that actually makes us incredibly complementary in the skills we bring to the business and in the palettes we bring to the customer. And it's our mission and our passion to deliver products that appeal to both the expert and the aficionado, as well as the novice and the everyman. And so Martin first approached me with the idea behind the company about 3.5 years ago. And what was happening is, at the time, he was incredibly frustrated in his wine and whiskey club, that to get an awesome bottle, he either needed to spend a lot of money or he needed to buy a bottle years in advance and sit on it. And as a scientist, he didn't understand why it had to be that way. So like any good scientist, he started reading and tinkering and inventing, and he, invented the technology behind the company. And when he approached me, I have to admit, I didn't really understand the science at first, but there were 4 main things that kind of hooked me on the idea. Number 1, a massive market to address. Number 2, trend lines that were making the market ripe for change and disruption, whether it's the global climate crisis that is forcing people to think more about sustainability, which is a cornerstone of what we do, or the shifting demographic from what had been a baby boomer driven consumer to more of a younger, modern millennial consumer who prefers different things than their daddy's brand of whiskey. And then, a differentiated technology and a mission like sustainability to make it something that we could get doubly passionate about. It's whiskey and it's sustainable. And, I saw those things in Bespoken. And so I was captured at moment one.
Nice. That's a great story. So I got to go back to the whiskey, Matt.
I heard you go back to it there.
I know. I popped the cork because I had a little taste and I'm like, all right. And that was a little sample pour just to make sure, but yeah, I had to pour a little bit more. So let's go back. Let's talk about the taste, Matt. What do you get in terms of the palate on this one and the finish?
The palate's got that nice, familiar 75-21% rye pepperiness up front. Nice little bit of spice. It's certainly not overpowering, and it doesn't at all taste like raw, like one might get from corn or a white dog, something coming right off the still. It doesn't taste that way. It doesn't smell that way. Again, the orange really comes through in the palate for me. I get a lot of orange, and then it kind of leads to a really nice mint coming through on the palate, and then the peppery finish just takes it down the pipes there. It's got a nice long high rye finish. I really enjoy it. I'm kind of like as impressed as your face is right now, Mark, over here with this. This is like kind of incredible.
I honestly, on the first taste, I was like instantly hit with that rye pepperiness. And the finish just continues to linger on this. And I don't know how else to say it. I'm really shocked, guys. I really am, because I'll be honest. I just thought I'm not really sure what this is going to end up being like, with whiskey distillate that's got some creative maturation to it. That's just not your typical standard, in the barrel, in the warehouse. I really didn't know what to expect. So, but I agree with you, Matt. That orange comes through as well on the palate for me, but that pepper really stands out. The pepper stands out on the finish. And I honestly, I cannot get over how long the finish on this lasts. I'm really impressed, guys.
Thank you.
Very much so.
Thank you.
So Martin, we talk a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you as well.
Yeah. So Stu said it, background, PhD in material science, right? And worked my entire life in kind of developing new materials for all kinds of different applications. And actually, the reason I came to the US was actually working on the Mars project with the University of Arizona, where I met the later founders of Bloom Energy. So we were actually building an oxygen generator to go to Mars. And without that, I wouldn't be sitting here, because without that, I wouldn't have come to California. I would have not met Stu. And as Stu said it, after spending many, many years, right, as being a VP of technology here, and I was actually ready to sign another offer for VP of technology for a 3D printing company. And I just told my wife, I actually had already signed it. And then I told my wife, I'm not going to sign it. And she said, no, you should do it. They're paying well. And I said, no, I just don't feel that's the right thing, right, to do. And like Stu said, right, I wanted to. It's funny because I personally don't see myself as a foodie or beverage guy, but all my friends keep telling me that, right? So I must be just talking a lot about it. but and Stu mentioned this, right? It really came out of this wine and whiskey club, right? And more like a challenge from the rest of the people there, saying, hey, why does it take so long, right? What's going on there, right?
Yeah.
And I realized, man, we were able. Over 50 years ago, we were able to bring people to the moon, right? And today we still use a method, right, of putting it in the barrel, right, and kind of crossing fingers, especially when you're new to this business, right? It's really hard for you, right? Matt mentioned it earlier, right? You kind of cross fingers for 5-6 years, right? And you're kind of hoping, and you're tasting maybe every 6 months if you're kind of impatient, right? Or you taste every year, and then you're just hoping to get to something, and I don't want to say this sounded ridiculous, but I figured, man, with all what's going in, right, that there should be a way where using today's technology methods, right, the data mining capabilities we have today, where we're taking fingerprints of every single spirit that we touch before we actually touch it, sort of, right, as it comes to us, right, and we're getting hundreds, sometimes up to thousands of different numbers out of it, right? Variables like composition, chemical composition, right? pH, and all kinds of things, right? That we look at. And then once we perform our process, we get another data set, right? And then we compare those two data sets, right? Try to identify what is really important from a taste, color, and aroma profile, right? And then we connect those two data sets with our process condition, and this is where we use a lot of data analytics and a lot of data power, right, to figure out, right, how are all these input variables, right, connected, and the process conditions, and how long we do it, and what temperatures, and how you toast, and how long, and what atmospheres you use, and all these things, right? How does that impact, for instance, your ppm level of vanilla, right, or vanillin to be chemically correct? Right. So yeah, and that's something that we kind of putting together. We've been in this for 3 years, and there's not a single week where we keep learning and learning. And this is where the big advantage comes from these learning cycles. To be able to learn 100 times faster than your fiercest competitor, let's call it. Sure. Right? Is that blew my mind as an engineer when I started working, because I knew what the power it is when your learning is so faster, because everything that I had worked on in the past, it was all about being faster and faster in the learning, and being hundreds of 1,000 times faster is just incredible. And yeah. And
here, what I think is interesting about this is the fact that, as we've had a lot of podcast episodes, and we've talked to a lot of people in the industry, and, back in the olden days, and we've had some of the older guys on, and their dads were involved in the industry. And, back then it was a lot about, taste. It was a lot about history. It was a lot about, we're doing things that we've always done, and because that's the way we've always done it. And we know that over the last, 25, 30 years, that science has obviously come into play. People are focused more. They have their labs in-house now. They've got their entire team of chemical engineers that are on site, that are doing a lot of scientific work as it pertains to bourbon. I think a lot of people, myself included, being a Kentuckian, we like to glorify bourbon in this grand old story, that everybody's grandpa and great-great-great-grandpa had a recipe and had a still at one point and distilled their own bourbon. And there is truth to that somewhat, but there is a lot of science that goes into it. And that side of I think that side of the process really gets downplayed in a lot of cases. But I think what you guys have done is you've taken that science part of it, you've adapted it, you've changed it, you've created a new thing, and it's like science on steroids with whiskey.
I think that's very true, Mark. But one of the things that's very important and is clearly a part of our ethos and our mission is to remain traditional and pure at our core, meaning that, as Martin said earlier, no additives, no chemicals. We're using the same exact materials that go into traditional maturation. We've just reimagined how to do it to get the most out of them.
Right. And that's something important to point out too. And when we get to the bourbon and the rye, because you can't, for bourbon, especially straight bourbon, you can't have additives, you can't add coloring, you can't add flavorings. For listeners at home, again, we talked about the fact that, to be a bourbon, you have to put it into a new charred oak container of some form. But that another requirement is that you can't add coloring or flavoring. So that's something you don't do that. So that, you make that clear. This is not like a flavored whiskey. This is not a flavored bourbon. This is whiskey it's a different process, but you're still, like you said, using the same distillate. You're using the same materials. You're just utilizing those in a different way.
That's right. And with more precision, right? Because we can, because we're operating at the microstave level, and each microstave is, roughly 1/25,000th the size of a barrel. So maybe it's, half the size of your little finger. Okay. Each microstave, because we've so painstakingly sourced them and characterized them, brings just the elements from the wood that we want for the recipe that we're trying to create, and none of what we don't want. And if you contrast that to a barrel, which is a naturally occurring element of woods, you get some of what you want, some of what you don't want, never in the same ratios, never consistently. We can pick and choose the microstave mixture and blend it together for exactly what we want. And then we have the same level of granularity with our toast and char. Rather than just having high, medium, and low without real precise definitions or consistency, we can toast and char at different temperatures for different durations on different surfaces to different depths in different atmospheres and moistures and et cetera, et cetera. And all of these levers really bring the craft to the maturation process to give us this precision control.
That's really cool. I mean, it really is, because, when you think about technology like this, I think the first reaction is, well, it's not craft, or it's not artisanal. You're not involved in the blend. It's science and it's technology that's making this, but it's really not. I mean, yes, there's science and technology involved, but there's still a craft to it to figure out what it takes to get to that point where you all want to be. So yes, it is science, but there is a large element of craft to this as well.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah. Well, guys, we're actually at the end of round one. That went really fast. So, Matt, final thoughts on the whiskey that distilled from bourbon mash.
Blown away. I try not to go into things with any preconceived notions whatsoever, but after hearing you all talk about what we were drinking, I'm really, really impressed. Really, really impressed. It's really good. It hits a lot of the great notes. It's just getting sweeter and toastier the longer it sits in the glass. Mm-hmm. I've still got some left. It's now just changed this really, really great campfire and marshmallow aroma, and it drinks really well. It's got all the flavors that I would be looking for. I think it's a real home run.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. The sweetness of it is what really kind of shocked me there as it sat in the glass longer and longer. We've been going 26 minutes now here, but and it's been poured up for that period of time. And as it's gotten more air on it and taking additional sips of it, the pepperiness is still there, but that sweetness, it's really opened up. And I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but I'm shocked.
Well, with the Tokyo Olympics opening up this week, starting with our Japanese-inspired whiskey was a good place to begin.
Absolutely.
There you go. That's great. All right, guys, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Stu and Martin with Bespoken Spirits in just a minute. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be right back. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. When you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for the second round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Mark, I'm doing great, man. Doing really great. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there, man. I'm just still, I'm still kind of reeling from the first round. I just don't know. I don't know what else to say, and like you said, I never want to have preconceived notions. I never want to judge a book by its cover. And I think I had looked at the color and just thought, okay, this is going to be a young whiskey. It's going to taste like a young whiskey. It's light. Man, just totally not what I expected at all. So beyond a pleasant surprise on that one, Matt. What about you?
Absolutely. And we have Stu Aaron and Martin Janousek, the co-founders of Bespoken Spirits, to thank for that. And gentlemen, welcome back for session or round number 2. And I think we are really in for a treat here if you want to let our listeners know what we've got poured up.
Yes, we got our Straight Bourbon, And I mentioned earlier that just won a double gold medal in San Francisco in that specific category. And it's actually the same mash bill than what he had before. And you're gonna be able to tell that the two have sort of almost nothing to do with each other. And as you know, to be able to qualify for the straight bourbon category in those competitions, we had to first have it sit for 2 years, which is the minimum for a straight bourbon. So that's what we did here. We actually bought a 2-year-old barrel, again from Indiana. And after 2 years, it's probably about the color from the spirit that you tasted in our special batch. Right. And then we run it through our process, right? Of course, a lot of pre-work goes in there, but yeah, can't wait to hear what you guys think about this spirit.
Yeah. So this one now, this is actually a straight bourbon. It's Indiana distilled, same mash bill as the whiskey we had in the first round. First thing that caught my eye was the color of this, how dark it is. I know our listeners can't see it. But I'll tell you, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof is actually one of my favorite bourbons. And, it comes out between 120 something to 130 something, always very dark. And the first thing I thought of when I looked at this bottle was a barrel proof type of bourbon. Just the coloration of this, it's nice and dark and rich. Again, I didn't want that to skew my my impression of the bourbon, but that was the first thing I noticed was the coloration of it, how much darker it was than the whiskey that we just had. But now again, this one is 94 proof, so it's a little bit higher. And you said it has to be aged, of course, to be a straight bourbon. See, this is a good kind of educational for our listeners that don't know all the requirements for bourbon and straight bourbon, et cetera. To be called a straight bourbon, it does have to be aged for at least 2 years. And so this one is aged for a minimum of 24 months. Now, is it right at, or you said you bought a 3-year-old barrel, yeah. Is that right?
2-year-old.
Okay.
2-year-old.
Okay.
2-year-old.
And then,
yeah.
So then, and like you said, though, the color on that, generally, I mean, if you've ever had a 2 or 3-year-old bourbon, you're going to know that it's going to usually be very light out of the barrel. It's not going to have time to absorb a lot of color. So this does not look anything like a 3-year-old or what I would anticipate a 3-year-old bourbon to look like. So your process on this one, how long did the process go? The first one you said it was a 3-day process, right?
Yeah.
So this one, are you looking at the same time frame on this one?
Yeah. There's only a couple of hours difference in the times for these two spirits. And interesting that you mentioned the color and that it kind of reminds you of a barrel proof or a single barrel, right? Fill up, because when we do the maturation process, we actually run it very close to the final proof of the spirit, right? So we only dilute it to a very small amount with water at the end, because as you probably know, the TDB is very precise on how much you can vary from your proof, right? So we typically run it 1-2% above what we want to bottle it, just to be on the safe side, so that the dilution, right, is very, very low. So we don't take it down from 62.5 to 45 or whatever percent, right? But we keep it at the same. We keep it at the same proof as what we bottle with minimal addition, and that's also why the color in this specific case is so close.
Nice, Matt. What are you picking up on this one over there?
I picked up at first a lot of caramel on the nose. I'm gonna steal some of your descriptors here, Mark. Some caramel and vanilla coming through, and then as it's sitting out, I'm getting a little bit more berry, a little bit more raspberry or blackberry coming through with it. And I caught just the slightest whiff of some dill coming across on the nose at one point. It's like I've got a really, really inviting, complex nose. I'm having fun with this.
Yeah, I actually, it seems like I pick up maybe almost a little bit of like an oak flavor on the nose. I don't know if that's intentional or if that's something I'm just imagining. Stu, Martin, is that part of the process, or is that part of what you guys were shooting for, or?
Yeah, we tip, especially John, who is we call him our maturation engineer. Other people call him the magician, right? He kind of he does love the woodier aromas,
Okay.
right? And
Gotcha.
so it makes perfectly sense that you see this. And again, to Stu's point, right? You're looking at 3 out of billions of recipes, right? That we could make, and this is just in parentheses, right? One recipe that just a group of people kind of within our internal and external tasting panel like the most. But
nice.
as you had seen on the spirit before, where you probably didn't get any of the oak or a lot of wood notes, probably even a lot of caramel, more probably vanilla. Right, and here you kind of get more of the caramel, for instance, and the caramel again comes from a different way of treating the wood.
Yeah. So going back to the blend or to the whiskey itself, I'm assuming you've got a pretty sizable amount of whiskey or distillate that you are working with. Now, with the first whiskey that we tasted, was that a specific? You had it in mind. You said that you wanted it to be similar to one of your Japanese whiskeys that you enjoy. So, is this a one-off release then? The whiskey from the bourbon mash, or is this something that you all release on a regular basis?
We're still releasing it, and there will be we believe that we want to have it like a limited edition. Right? And at some point we want to. That's why we called it a special batch. But there's still even something that I think Stu might comment on. There's still something that we are developing. Right? We had our original. Kind of organically.
It's been so popular, Mark. It's been so popular that we're continuing to offer it just because it's really first it blew us away, and then it's just done really well with the consumer. So we expect to keep producing it at least for the foreseeable future. And again, it blows people away, and that's one of the reasons we like tasting that one with the one you're tasting now. It blows people away to realize that they are the exact same white dog. Right. Yeah. And that we could take that white dog into these 2 very different directions just by controlling our recipe, meaning the microstave mixture and the toast and char, and the environment, the temperature, pressure, agitation rate within our machine, that we can take one white dog and make it either a Japanese inspired light floral whiskey or a bourbon, straight bourbon with the vanilla and caramel and oak that you mentioned.
Yeah. So go ahead, Matt.
With your process, you are going to be able to produce that same flavor and these same flavors reliably every time, since you can control and micromanage everything that goes into it. So this is the art, like the cutting edge of the blending of the science behind the taste and maturation process here. We can taste today the same whiskey pretty much exactly that a year from now down the road, if you're still releasing that batch, we can be tasting again.
Yeah, that's right. The control and the repeatability and then the sustainability are really the cornerstones of this process. And that's why, you're tasting the Bespoken branded products that we have out there in the market, a couple of them. But that's why a large part of our business is providing services behind the scenes to other distillers, rectifiers, retailers who either want to take their young product and make it better, faster, cheaper, or in many cases, we're working with their already matured product that may have spent 1, 3, 5, 7 years in a barrel. And when it came out, nature was not kind to it. And we work with that spirit to tune it to the precise sensory profile that customer actually wants for their products in the marketplace.
Okay. So you could also be taking somebody's older product that has a flavor and a taste profile that they really like, and could you not then take their younger product and figure out a way to replicate the same characteristics?
Generally speaking, yes, that's spot on. We're working with the older product either because that's what the customer has and they're trying to get the value out of it, or in some cases it's based on regulatory requirements where you can't call something a whiskey unless it's been in a barrel for a certain amount of time. Right. Yeah. So in those environments, we'll start with product that's crossed that threshold and then add the value to it.
Very interesting. Yeah. So your core business then is really you got a couple of different avenues. I mean, you've got your spirits you're releasing under the name of Bespoken Spirits, but then also you provide these services to these other distillers or rectifiers, non-distilling producers out there that have barrels that need help, or that want some changes made to their existing distillate. You guys can actually help them do that then.
Exactly.
So this bourbon that we're drinking, so will this be something, this will be a continual release and you're going to shoot for this same profile release after release, or will it be something that you say, hey, you know what, for this one, let's just, let's change. You said you had how many different combination possibilities? 18. Did you say 18 billion or
over 20 billion?
Over 20 billion. Okay. So will there be a point where you just say, okay, let's switch it up a little bit and
Mark and I will sign up to be on the tasting panel for all of those if you want.
Feel free to send us all 20 billion samples.
Yeah, we'll just build a pipeline from Mark's basement over to your place, and you can just send us samples on the daily.
Yeah, no, to your question, Mark, our plan is to, this is a winner, as Martin said, it was a double gold winner in San Francisco. So our plan is to continue to produce this one as our commercial product. But we also, do a lot of, I'd call it the equivalent of single barrel programs, where we can take slight variants of this for customers that want something unique to them, whether that's a retailer, whether that's a whiskey club, whether that's, a distiller or rectifier. And so there's a lot of, additional things we can do under either the Bespoken brand or under the customer's brand around this core. But we will continue to offer this straight bourbon as the product that you are tasting now.
Sure. And it won double gold at San Francisco. So, I mean, you've obviously done something very, very good here. It's crazy. Matt, let's talk about the flavor. I mean, we talked about the whiskey earlier. So talk about the what you get on the palate and the finish on this one, on the bourbon.
Palate's got the good vanilla and caramel right up front. The oak really comes through, like you were saying, Mark. You pick up a lot of oak. It's got the good amount of wood, certainly not too far. Sometimes we get into things that have spent a little too much time in the barrel and they have a kind of a drying tannic effect, and the oak just really takes over. But this really has really great characteristics where you're not just tasting the flavor that a barrel might impart. I think with those, sometimes you get like the leather and the tobacco and caramel and vanilla that you get from the oak, but I feel like I'm actually tasting like the oak, the flavors from that in there. It's got like a really nice sweet toastiness to it. And I get a lot of a good cinnamon spice and good peppercorn as well coming through. I think that high rye recipe really hits it well. Nice long finish. Yeah,
seriously, Matt, when you think about a 3-year-old bourbon, this is not what I think about when I think about a 3-year-old bourbon at all. I mean, this drinks like an 8 or 10-year-old bourbon to me.
And just to clarify, it's 2 years old, not 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. So a 2-year-old. Yeah. When I think of a 2-year-old bourbon, I think of a lot of grassiness, a lot of maybe straw or hay or just that really young corn forward type of distillate. And we've tasted some of those before. So again, this doesn't resemble anything close to what a 2-year-old bourbon tastes like.
I think a lot of times when Mark and I taste younger products, we sort of celebrate them for a lot of the grain that comes out in it. It's a good experiment sometimes and a good way to remember the grains that go in a sometimes a younger bourbon really highlights the grain more than the finished product, but this is definitely not the case. This drink's far, far beyond its age. And what was the decision to go with 94 proof? Had you tried it at different proof points?
Yeah. As you can imagine, that's something where the tasting panel, that's not where the machine helps us. That's not where the chemistry helps us. That's where the external tasting panel and internal tasting panel, they felt. I wouldn't say that everybody agrees always on what they like. We generally like putting it a little bit higher in the bottle so that people have the opportunity, right, to drink it either neat, add some water, right, or add some ice, right, and that you can kind of see the development, how the spirit develops, right? Because once you're sort of below 40, I think it gets a little bit, you kind of lose a lot of the complexity. So it just gives you time to enjoy it longer in the glass, especially if you want to drink it on with a nice big piece of ice.
Yeah. So now you guys, as a company, I mean, you're young. You said the concept was around what 2017, 16 or 17, but you launched in 18. Is that right?
That's right.
But you've had some pretty significant investors. You mentioned one earlier, Derek Jeter, which any baseball fans out there know that name. So can you talk about, if you can't understand, but about how that relationship, how that came about, how he got involved with you guys?
Yeah. So Derek and I had worked together in a past life. He was an investor in one of my prior companies. And when he left baseball, you may recall he launched a media company called the Players Tribune, which was all about really letting athletes take control of their own brand, of their own stories, and tell those stories directly rather than relying on the sports media. Right. And when we launched this company, it struck me that there were some parallels between what we're trying to do to let people take control of their own brand or create their own spirits brand and be able to customize it to what they need. And so, we reached out to Derek, and he loved the idea. He loved the technology and the capabilities. He's a pretty shrewd investor, and we loved obviously somebody with his insights and his experience and his pedigree on the team. So we were just really thrilled to have him involved, and he's been a great asset to the company.
Now I have to ask though, is he a whiskey drinker? I'm just curious, All right. You don't have to answer that question.
Yeah, that would be unfair for us to answer for him. But,
So I have to ask though, I was reading some articles about you guys, and one that I saw had a quote, and it really struck me. So I'm kind of curious. I wanted to touch on that. It said, you defined the company as a cross between 23andMe, Nespresso, and Impossible Foods. And I thought that was really, really a cool quote. Can you guys, one of you guys, or whoever, I can't remember which one of you said that, but can you kind of touch on that, or can you expand on that quout just a little bit?
Yeah,
it was Stu.
It was me. Usually the wackier things come out of my mouth and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, and it really is an intersection of those three things. We're like 23andMe because we're correlating customer preferences with recipes and final products, which is kind of like mapping a spirit's genome, if you will. And that's where the data analytics and the artificial intelligence and all that stuff comes to bear. We're like Nespresso because our machine, which we call the activator, where the ACT stands for aroma, color, and taste, takes spirit and our proprietary microstave mixture and produces whiskey quickly, although obviously at industrial scale. So you can think of our microstave mixture as the pod, if you will.
Okay.
Right? Pod plus spirit, press a button, 3 days later comes out your result, but at industrial scale, obviously. And finally, we're like Impossible Foods because we're addressing a mature industry by redefining an antiquated production model and creating a process that's much more scientific and more sustainable.
That makes sense. I mean, I appreciate that explanation. I saw that and I thought, what a great quote. I really want to understand that a little bit deeper for sure. So let me ask you this: you guys, you've come into the marketplace, you got a whole new idea. It's all this science and stuff, and you're going against these companies, the Kentucky good old boys that have been around for hundreds of years, and they're making these products and they're putting them up in warehouses, for leaving them there for 8, 10, 12, 15 years. So what's been the response and the reaction that you guys have seen? Have you had people that have been like, really, you're going to do this, or this isn't going to work? Or, I mean, what kind of responses have you had from people? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it definitely varies. And no matter what the response is, good or bad, at the end of the day, it boils down to doing something like we're doing with you, which is try the product and tell us what you think and let the product speak for itself. But, there are always, and there will continue to be some super traditionalists who won't budge off of the age-old concepts, and quite frankly, they're not our target market. But that's an increasingly smaller and smaller percentage of the market. And what we're finding is that consumers and industry players alike are embracing what we can do, especially given the quality of the product. And just to give some examples of the large existing players, right? How can they benefit, right? There's economic benefit to some of the things we can do for them. There's sustainability benefit to what we do. We use less than 3% of the wood less than 1% of the energy, and at least 20% less water than the alternative method. So there's a strong sustainability argument for what we do, and we can help with certain business models. Like think about the large company that wants to roll out RTD cocktails, ready to drink cocktails, and they want to have the spirit in that cocktail taste like their premium aged spirit, but they don't want to use their premium aged spirit in that cocktail.
Right.
We give them the ability to use their younger spirit, make it taste like the older spirit, use it in the ready to drink cocktail, and keep their premium spirit to sell as a premium spirit. So there's lots of pockets of synergy and value add. We're not trying to take them down. We're not trying to compete with them. We're trying to add value to the equation, whether that's economic, new product introduction and innovation, or sustainability.
That's really cool that you said that, because I had not thought about that aspect of it in terms of.
I was thinking the exact same thing, like as you're saying here, Mark. Like, how clever! I would have never thought to go down that avenue, but that makes complete and total sense.
That's why these guys are rocket scientists, Matt, and we're not. Right?
That's right. That's I'm kidding.
But no, I mean that's really cool, and I would have never thought in terms of RTDs, the ready to drink cocktails, because everybody is putting those out now. I mean, you see them on the shelves. All the brands are starting to release their stuff. And obviously bourbon is booming, whiskey is booming. The sales are off the charts, and everybody says, "Oh, there's a bourbon bubble, it's going to pop." But then you see like Heaven Hill that just did a huge expansion of their facility down there. Heaven Hill or Buffalo Trace is getting ready to do some expanding as well. I mean, all these distilleries are doing all this expansion, but they can't keep up with the demand of the product. So it's hard for them to take existing stock or aged whiskey, like you said, and put that into a new product, especially something like a ready to drink. So seeing that opportunity, that's genius. It really is. I mean, I never would have thought of that.
We work with a lot of customers who run into I call it the wish I made more syndrome, which is they made a product, they aged it for, however long they aged it for. People loved it. They promptly sold it out. And they're like, holy crap, I wish I made more back then.
Yeah.
So we work with a lot of customers trying to bridge that gap to the, having the same product without having to wait 5 more years. You
can say a bad word, Stu. It's okay. We're a mature audience. So, but no, we understand exactly what you're saying. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have run into that situation where they're like, we're out of product. We sold it all. We don't have this. We should have made more. Mm-hmm. That's really, I never thought about that as an opportunity, but that's really cool. So Matt, we're kind of at the end of round 2 here. So let's what do you think? Final thoughts on the straight bourbon that we just had.
I think, like we've been saying so far this whole show, I'm really impressed with the flavor, the taste, the palate on it, the finish especially, and then absolutely blown away by the age and what you all have done with it. The technical specs behind it do not really translate to what I think I should be drinking. So you all have done a great job. And I mean that with the most respect and highest regard. I'm blown away. It's really good.
I agree, Matt. It's funny because we talk about on the show, we've talked about what we call gateway bourbons, introductory bourbons that kind of touch those notes that you think about when you think about bourbon, the ones that actually touch on those quintessential bourbon types of notes. And this does. I mean, this mm-hmm. has the caramel, it has the vanilla, it has the sweetness, it has a little bit of the spiciness from the rye. It's got a little bit of oakiness to it. It's got a beautiful color. This is a bourbon that not created by sitting in a warehouse for 8 years, but created through some advanced technology and science. But it actually, to me, meets what I would consider to be all of the requirements of what a solid, good, drinkable bourbon should be.
I agree.
Yeah. And now I'm starting to pick up a little bit of leather, Matt. now that you mentioned that earlier, I'm like, now that it's set out for a while, I'm starting to get that. So guys, another one, again, I think you can just kind of tell from our response that Matt and I we're both very pleasantly surprised by both of these so far. So, but the next one is the real test because Matt is a rye guy. So we'll be moving on to the rye in the next round. So I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsor, and we'll get more with Stu and Martin from Bespoken Spirits in just a moment. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be right back. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. We want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about Three Chord Whiskey. Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the Three Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels, which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, each small batch blend of Three Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12-bar reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from Three Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the Three Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about Three Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final period, round session, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Mark, I'm doing really well, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, but I was going to say earlier, I'm kind of disappointed because the Tour de France is over. And, I absolutely love getting up in the mornings and turning that on and watching 5 hours of skinny guys out there on their bicycles riding through the mountains and stuff in France and the Alps and the Pyrenees. So I'm disappointed that it's all over with. But, other than that, Matt, I think I'm doing okay.
Well, I'm glad you're doing all right. It's sad that it is over, but great that we got to have it again this year during its usual time period of July.
No kidding, man. I think that to me is probably one of the greatest things is to be able to watch it and to see the fans on the side of the mountains and the roadways everywhere. Some people still wearing masks, a lot of people not. But just fans out there enjoying cycling. I know we've got a lot of bourbon listeners out there that are probably not cycling fans, but you and I are, so we can, we can throw that in there, right?
That's right. And this is our podcast, so that's
our podcast.
Yeah.
All right, but let's get back to what we need to talk about. Matt, tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
Please, let's get back to it because we've got great guests. We've got Stu Aaron and Martin Janousek, the co-founders of Bespoken Spirits, and they have completely thrown us for a loop and sort of blown our minds. And I'm sure that we've got much more to come. So, gentlemen, what do we have poured up for this, our third and final session round period?
So, gentlemen, this is our rye whiskey from Bespoken Spirits. It is 95% of rye, right? 5% of malt. And again, you probably recognize the mash bill, again sourced from Indiana, and for a good reason, right? They make some of the best rye.
Sure.
Right? No discussion there. And for this one to be able to call it a rye whiskey, we actually had to put it in the barrel. And to your point of education, I had to learn this. And all of us had to learn this, right?
Right.
Just like with bourbon, right? To call something a rye whiskey, it has to rest in a white oak, in a charred white oak barrel. Interestingly enough, there's no time recommendation, right? Mm-hmm. Just like for the regular bourbon.
Right.
But what we were told to not run into any issues with the TDB, right? Write on your label that you matured it for 3 months in the barrel, and then you will get your COLA approval. So this one was rested for 3 months in the barrel. As you can expect, after 3 months, it's kind of still, you can probably tell a little bit light, very, very light hue of color, right? But it's sort of like like freshos distilled with a very slight color that it put up, and then again around 3 days, right, in our activator. And this is the spirit that I mentioned that was a category winner at the whiskey, the World Whiskey Awards in UK this year. And about till 3 months ago, if you would have asked me what is your favorite one, I would have never picked one, but this is my favorite. So
this is your favorite. Okay, all right.
Right, and currently this is my favorite.
And this one comes in.
I kind of feel bad saying this because it's like which one is your favorite child, right? You can't pick one,
yeah.
Right? But this one's my favorite because I hope you agree. It's because it's just so bold, it's so complex. And you talked earlier about the finish. This one I can taste 5 minutes later still.
Yeah. And I mean, man,
in a good way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. It's not like after like, oh man, what was that? Yeah. But so we're big fans of the Indiana rye mash bill. Matt is the rye expert. He's the rye guy.
I don't know about expert. If drinking a lot of rye means you're an expert, then yeah, sign me up. But
yeah. So Matt, what are you picking up on this one on the nose over there?
The first thing I really pick up, like Martin, you were saying, is the complexity. At first, I got a big whiff of rye grain, and now I think maybe that's just because Mark and I have just recently opened up that bottle, and maybe it needed a second or two to get some air behind it. But now I'm picking up more of the spearmint is coming across. There's still that really, really bright rye grain is coming through, but more spearmint. I picked up, Mark, like one of your favorites. I picked up like a little bit of bubble gum with it as well. Yep. There's like the sweetness from
that's sweet.
From bubble gum comes through a little bit on the flavor. But I feel like this is, back to your point, Martin, I could just sit here and like keep smelling and nosing this and picking up something different each time. It's really complex, really, but bold. Like you were saying, you certainly didn't shy away from giving us a nice nose on it. It's not, nothing's hidden. That's for certain.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Matt. It's funny because I'm kind of picking up almost like a brown sugary or a burnt sugar type of profile on this, which I know people usually would associate more with a bourbon. But I'm actually picking it up on this rye, a little bit of like a burnt sugar, and even a little bit of almost like a black tea, like a steeped black tea. I don't know if you get that or not, but and the mint, you mentioned the mint. That was probably the first thing that jumped out to me, Matt, was the mintiness. And then as it sat in the glass, those other little flavors started kind of popping up there as well. But I do agree. I think the longer it sits here and the more you sniff it, Martin, the more flavors that you're, that we're going to be able to pick out. And this one, I think I said it was 100 proof. I don't know if I said that or not, but this one is our highest proof expression that we're tasting tonight at 100 proof. So what drove the decision to do it at 100 proof?
So first, of course, the profile of the spirit, right? But in addition to sort of what I mentioned earlier, right? We did want to give the customer most for the buck, right? So you can, again, right? You can, if you prefer, right? You can dilute it down yourself. A little bit nostalgic, maybe also 100 proof, right? For this one, and we if you get a chance to try our original batch, we also bottle it at 100 proof, because it's 100 proof. But of course, if it wouldn't taste well at 100 proof, of course we wouldn't bottle it there. So again, it's a feedback of many things and inputs from the tasting panel, where we work with people from the industry, people who have written books about bourbon, and people from the trade. And we get all the feedback from those people, and then we have to make a decision on what we like. The final word has that's Jordan.
So guys, let's, you mentioned sustainability earlier, Stu, and let's kind of go back and touch on that, because anybody that knows about the bourbon rye whiskey, obviously you've got all these barrels. You've got to have barrels. You got to have oak trees. You got to cut them down. You've got to have a ton of water to do everything. It takes a lot of energy, et cetera. It takes time. This process that you guys have created here, what you're doing, that really, really cuts into the impact of all of those things, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Just kind of go into that.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, compared to a traditional, let's say 5-year barrel age process, our method uses on the order of 97% less wood.
Okay.
Because we're using, hundreds to thousands of these micro staves rather than, full barrels. It uses on the order of 99% less energy, because you're talking about, powering and cooling an activator for 3 days versus 5 years.
Right.
And, because we've got no angel share, you're saving at least 20% of the water when you compare it to what you would, lose to eveporation over the course of 5 years.
Yeah. And that's one thing when I was reading about you guys and reading some articles, the conversation about the angel's share, that to me really, really stood out, because I mean, anybody that knows about bourbon, they know obviously as the barrel sits there over, especially in Kentucky with the extremes in the weather, you're going to lose a lot of whiskey, or water, either one. But you're going to lose that angel's share. But with this process, you guys are able to take these young distillates where you still have, you have a complete 53-gallon barrel or whatever, however it's stored, and you're able to really use your technology and create a bourbon that tastes like a 6 or 8 year old bourbon without that loss. I mean, that could be, I mean, financially for the industry as a whole, I mean, that could be huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, imagine any other industry where they told you that 20% of your product would be gone before you got it to market. And it sounds absolutely preposterous, but it's something that this industry has gotten used to. And in fact, it's passed that burden along to the customer in terms of, poorer economics, and to the planet in terms of poor sustainability. And it's nice to be able to recoup those things without sacrificing quality.
Yeah, now, Matt, that's right up your alley, Matt.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking back to my restaurant days when I was cooking in restaurants. That would be like when I was working in the back as a cook. If we got whole chickens in, it'd be like if you couldn't use the carcass afterward for stock, or like you just had to throw it away. So it makes complete sense. Just thinking of it from that perspective, as having product that you can't utilize in a kitchen. You use everything. It all goes into a big stock pot to make your chicken stock, your vegetable stock, or whatever, all the onion trimmings, celery trimmings, whatever, it all goes in. It's like the same thing. If you were told you couldn't use that in a restaurant, people would lose their minds.
Yeah. One interesting use case we've done some work with has been, especially driven by the pandemic, has been with brewers who, because of the pandemic, were finding themselves with a lot of excess or expired beer. And they started to realize that rather than paying somebody to take that beer back and destroy it, they could actually recycle or upcycle that beer into whiskey by distilling it. But typically you don't get very good whiskey when you distill a beer. Some people call it bourbon. Right. And, it creates an opportunity for us to work with that, bourbon and convert it into a higher quality whiskey that some of these breweries can then, monetize and again, have less waste.
Another genius idea that neither Matt nor I would have thought of. No, that's really cool. I never in a million years would have thought. I didn't even know that that breweries did that. Honestly, I didn't know that was I know what, you get to the beer part of it, but I never thought about having beer that you actually go back and like you said, I mean, distill it to a whiskey. Never thought about that happening. So very cool. So now when you guys work with clients, I mean, how does that happen? I'm sure you would love to tell us who some of your clients are, right?
We would, but of course we can't. We're like an Intel Inside in that respect.
There you go. I get it. Yeah. So, but when you reach out or people reach out to you guys, I mean, how does the process work? Do they come to you and say, here's what we have. We want to make it taste like this, or we don't have anything and we want you guys just to help us get some barrels and create this product that's going to taste like whatever we want it to taste like. Can you kind of describe that process?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously the motivations will vary between, economic or quality or innovation or whatnot. But the process is typically the same. The customer wants something. They have some vision in mind for the sensory profile that they want on the final spirit. And what we'll do is we'll go through a design process with them where we'll try to get them to describe what they want. And some customers know exactly what they want. I want this much vanilla. I want this much, nut. I want this much caramel. I want it to have this, this citrus smell, and they can define exactly what they want. For others, it's more of I like this, and they'll hold up another brand or something that they like to drink and say, make it like this. And we'll use that process to try to identify the characteristics of the spirit that they're trying to create. It's almost like analogous to the Pantone wheel for color you would find in a paint store, where instead of defining ruby red or pea green as a combination of red, yellow, and blue, we're defining smoky whiskey or French toast as a combination of aroma, color, and taste. And once we know what they want, then we can go about designing the recipe to deliver that. And the recipe basically has 4 elements to it. It's got the source spirit, which is our starting point. And while we can take a source spirit in a wide range of directions, as evidenced by the Japanese-inspired whiskey and the bourbon that you've already tasted, the source spirit does impose some limitations on what we can do. Then the second element of our recipe is the wood, the microstave mixture that we handcraft and blend for the desired result. And for one recipe, we might use all American oak, whereas for another, we might mix some American oak with some French oak with some cherry. And we can create different, quantities and ratios and combinations of the wood. The third element is the toast and char that we apply to those microstaves to get the result that we want. And then the last element is the environmental settings on the activator when the source spirit and the microstaves are put in. And that includes things like temperature and pressure and agitation rate and atmosphere and things like that. And as we said before, when you put all those levers together, you got over 20 billion unique combinations that you can create. Wow. And we use our experiences, our chemical fingerprints, and all the data and analysis to help us hone in on the recipe to deliver the desired result.
So let's talk about that part of it, because we mentioned that a little bit during the break, and we talked about that some. So like a gas chromatograph, I think is what it's called, where you can take, a spirit, break it down. You can really see the individual components of that. So if somebody comes to you all and says, hey, we would like to create this, or we want this to taste like XYZ brand, or we want it to taste like, earlier we talked about the first thing, the whiskey we drink. Martin, you said you wanted it to kind of resemble your Japanese whiskey. So can you actually take an existing whiskey and kind of break it down from that perspective to see what the components are, and then utilize your technology and science to match or duplicate that breakdown? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so that's exactly Mark, how we do it, right? Okay. So if we have a target, like Stu said, sometimes they give us a bottle or they tell us a brand that they like, right? Then we characterize the target, right? We look for, not everything in the spirit is important, and it's been an interesting journey to figure out what really matters, and we're still, I don't know whether we've learned 90% or 9%. I don't know yet, right? from really understanding this, because it is it's really interesting how complex this parentheses problem is, right? To really understand, right? Especially the whole influence on us, right? On the humans, right? What is really important for us, right? And you might taste vanilla, right? But Matt might say, I think this is very low on vanilla, right? Because Matt's threshold might be at 80 ppm of vanillin, right? But yours might be at 50, right? And these are things that we can quantify, right, by using those methods. And then depending on the target, Stu mentioned the starting spirit is very, very crucial, right? I heard people saying, it's all about the barrel aging, right? 80% or 90 or 70. People kind of throw out all kinds of numbers, right? But the starting spirit, right, is super, super crucial, because a lot of the notes that we kind of value, right, on an aged spirit, right, have almost less to do with the barrel, but actually more with the starting spirit. So if you don't have certain, let's call them alcohols, right, in your starting spirit, for instance, when you're looking for some of those fruity esters, right, unless you have them in your starting spirit, you're not going to get them during maturation, right? Because from those esters you have to form acids, right? Those esters then react again with other alcohols, whether that's ethanol, whether that's longer chain alcohols, right, to form those highly complex esters. And this is where our research is focusing on, right, to understand what do we need to have in the spirit, right? How much of it do we need to have in the spirit? And then how do we control those different oxidation reactions and esterification reactions to form those specific compounds, right, that we perceive as pleasant, as fruity. Some people don't like them, right? Some people call, if you have too much ethyl acetate in your spirit, that's a very common one that you get in a lot of bourbons, right? Which is kind of nail polishy like, right? Some people are very sensitive to it. Others, when you ask them, they don't understand. So these are the things that we are measuring and comparing, right, from where we start, and then with the end composition of the spirit that is the target, and then with the different conditions that we can change, from toasting, from charring, etc. That Stu already mentioned, right? We're kind of working us towards the target by using analytical methods.
So, and with the wood that you guys are using, your micro staves, right, is what you call them, Stu? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, where are you sourcing that wood from somewhere, and then are other people actually toasting and charring that, or is that something that you all do yourselves?
Yeah, no, we do. So we source the wood, right, from very famous brands that you might know, or people might know, that are in the cooper that buy barrels, right? But then we do all the toasting and all the treatments in house, and it was primarily driven by first experiences, right? By ordering, Stu mentioned earlier, right? You order something medium toast from 2 different suppliers, yeah. If there's anything that I learned with having a PhD in material science, if a material looks different, right, from the get-go, it probably is different.
Something's different there. Yeah, how funny.
So that's why, unfortunately, and of course, over the time, right, we built this is one of our core competencies, right, to the wood treatments, and because we don't use barrels, right, we can do things that you just can't do with a barrel, right? We use the equipment that we use, right? Other people would use in aerospace for applications, right? So we use super sophisticated equipment to control atmosphere, to control temperature, right? Very, very precisely. And even the wood, right? We're super critical on selecting the wood. So it happens that we ship back thousands of staves, right, to our suppliers, and they probably ship it somewhere else once they get them back, right? Because we say they're not according to standard what we actually agreed on. So we also had to develop the methods, right, to kind of characterize the wood, right, to sort of prove actually our suppliers, right, that the wood is not according to what it should be.
Yeah. So after you guys, after you apply your process, I'm just curious, like for yourself, for your spirits, the Bespoken Spirits, you do the process. Do you guys then just tank the whiskey after it's done? Is that the process? I mean, you don't put it back in a barrel, I'm assuming, right?
No,
so it's tanked, or is it immediately bottled from the process?
It typically goes into a larger tank or in a tote, right, depending on the process.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We do some particle filtering just to remove some potential char or wood pieces, depending on the wood treatments that we did. Right. We don't do any. I should mention this too. Right. All the spirits that you had. Right. We didn't do any chill filtration.
Okay.
Right, because we believe that removes a lot of the good stuff, right, that you actually want to taste. And
sure. So the same thing for your clients then, I guess. Once you process anything that they've sent you, you're not putting it back into barrels to ship back or send back to them. It goes into some type of tote or a tank or whatever, and goes back to the client. Okay, so it's preserved as it is, and it goes from there. That's really cool. So now you guys don't just do whiskey or bourbon and rye. You've done other spirits as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And whether that's rum, whether that's brandy, we can't call it tequila because we process it in California, but it actually won a double hour agave-based spirit. That's I believe is the It's, I believe, is the legal correct name of it. Won a double gold medal in San Francisco. So
wow.
we work with all types of spirits. I should have mentioned gin also. We have a customer who wants to have like an old style Tom gin, right? And yes,
Brandy,
yeah.
So would you say that you guys then are you more focused then on your brand, your spirits that you're putting out, or do you think you're more focused on working with other distillers, rectifiers, or is it just a happy 50-50 blend of both aspects?
It's about 50-50, and they're very synergistic. I mean, in all honesty, the Bespoken branded products started out as a validation tool to provide services to industry customers, because we knew if we told them the story, the first reaction would be, wow, maybe we get a little drool running down the cheek. The next reaction would be, why should we believe you? And originally the brand was so that we could validate, number one, quality by taking it to competition and getting it blindly and independently judged to be, good quality. Number two, repeatability, to Matt's point earlier, that if we always used the same recipe, we always got the same result. And number three, designability, that if we set out for a particular aroma, color, and taste profile, we could get really darn close to that. And the brand just blew us away in terms of, hitting all of those goals. We took home 44 medals in our first 18 months of eligibility and prestigious competitions for all the different categories against well-known products and much older products. And it's done well with the consumer as well. So it's been a nice validation for us, and it's been a nice business for us. And we're excited to keep it, select and premium, but to continue to grow the brand.
So has there been anybody that originally said, this is not going to work, you guys are crazy, I don't know what you're thinking, you can't come into this industry, and then you win these awards and they come back and are like, well, shit, I was wrong, I apologize? Have you had that moment yet? Have you had those moments where people
we've had a lot of those moments, from smaller conversions like with you guys to the larger conversions with folks that were maybe a little bit more hostile going in.
Sure.
And we accept, we accept, I don't know if it's a 12-step process, but we accept that people have to go through a process depending on where they are on the, in the spectrum coming in. And we're happy to walk that process with them. I mean, we know at the end of the day, the product is what matters. None of the stories we tell, none of the cool, aspects of our backgrounds or our wonderful personalities or good looks really matter. At the end of the day, it's does the product, meet the criteria, and that's what we have to hang our hat on.
Yeah, well, nobody can see you guys, but you're two pretty good looking guys. All right, so we'll give you that, and
that's why Mark and I have to line up such great guests for this podcast, because it's all about the finished product. If it were just Mark and I every week,
that's right, exactly right.
We wouldn't have made it past episode 3.
That's right. That's
why
we would not.
We're so grateful to have you both here to help float the podcast for another week.
You have a great face for radio.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That holds true for Matt and myself. Definitely more for me than Matt, for sure. So, all right. So let me ask you this: in terms of Bespoken Spirits, your brand, how would you define, or what do you consider to be your core customer?
I'd say our sweet spot is with, it's two sweet spots. One is with the modern consumer, who, again, wants variety, value, authenticity, and purpose, does not want to drink their daddy's whiskey.
Right.
In fact, goes out of their way to not drink anything their daddy ever drank. Cares about, causes like climate change, is tech savvy. That's one sweet spot that we see that just kind of gravitates to the value of our products, the variety of our products, the technology, and the sustainability messages. And then the other sweet spot is really almost the other end of the spectrum. It's somebody who really does care about quality, isn't in the religious side of the camp, but cares about quality and is just looking for what's the best products they can have for their respective budget. And that's the other sweet spot for the products.
Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of budgets, can we talk about pricing on this? Where we haven't mentioned that your products, where would that fall in terms of pricing on that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, they're premium products and they're priced accordingly. So our 375 milliliter bottles are typically priced between $30 and $39, depending on which of the SKUs you're talking about. Okay. And our 750s, which we're getting ready to release in the next month or so, are going to be in the $40 to $50 range.
Okay. Yeah. So fairly priced. I think so. I mean, that makes sense to me. So Matt, let's go back and talk about the rye, talk about the palate. I don't think we did that, right? Talk about the palate.
Yeah. Big and spicy right up front.
Yes,
That's
sir.
for sure. Nice big hit of pepper, nice big heat right on the front. Then it really lends way to that, the mint, the spearmint, peppermint coming through. And then I'm getting like a really nice sweet kind of caramel and almost like some sort of a sweet nectar, like a floral sweet nectar comes through on the taste. And then the finish, like you were saying, Martin, is really nice and long. It sticks around for a long time. It's got good heat, really great coating on the tongue. And I'm actually finding that the finish for me, as it sits around a little bit longer, it brings out some citrus, getting like a little bit of tangerine going along with like the peppercorn on the very end of it as it sits on the tongue. It's just really, really great, really complex, really well-rounded, drinks very, very well.
Matt, would you have ever imagined that it's a 3-month-old?
No, Mark, I would not have imagined this was a 3-month-old rye at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. So guys, we're at the end of the round and going to wrap it up here. But before we do, couple questions. Well, one question is, do you have a facility? Because are you in California, right? So do you have a facility? Can people come to your facility and tour and look around, or is it just you guys have a space and you do your thing and it's like behind the veil? Don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah, we're not set up for visitors. We actually have 2 locations. One is our R&D lab in Menlo Park, where we do all the recipe development, right, all the analytical chemistry. And then we have on the beautiful island of Treasure Island, that's a little island between San Francisco and Oakland. That's where our production facility is. But unfortunately, not yet. My big dream is to have a facility or have a tasting room at the pier in San Francisco or on Treasure Island one day. So hopefully.
I haven't been to San Francisco in about 30 years. So yeah, that'd be a great opportunity to come out there. So you guys make that happen. It'd be awesome. So where can our listeners, where can they find you guys in terms of your products? And then where can they find Bespoken Spirits in terms of social media and online? The
easiest thing to do for both those purposes is to go to our website, bespokenspirits.com.
Okay.
And we've got a link to retailers, can find near me, and the ability to purchase online. And then, Instagram Bespoken Spirits is also a great source for all kinds of neat and exciting information on the products and uses and cocktails and all kinds of fun stuff like that.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. So what's the future look like, guys, before we wrap it up? What's it look like for you guys individually and also for Bespoken Spirits?
A lot of work and a lot of fun, and we look forward to the day when we sit down with you guys and you say, "Remember when not as many people knew about you?"
Do you remember when you're on the Bourbon Life podcast and then you blew up right after that? Do you remember that? Yeah. So, any special releases or anything exciting going on in terms of that? Or are you just going to keep producing what you got and doing your thing? Because not that it's a bad thing, because what we tasted tonight was really, really, really good. So,
well, like we said earlier, we just released the Straight Bourbon, and we're getting ready to roll out volumes to meet demand. And as I said earlier as well, we're expanding our portfolio. We initially went to market with 375s, and we're now rolling out the 750s as well. The 375s were a great starting point because, especially given the variety of what we can do, it gave people the ability to try 2 different bespoken products for the same money they would pay for one larger bottle of something else.
Right.
And again, that's a pretty important part of the value proposition that we offer.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So, Matt, final thoughts on the rye.
Once again, there's not a lot I can say about the rye that I haven't said about everything else. I'm really impressed. It's really I would have never thought this is what we were going to be drinking tonight. So thank you for taking my normal, ordinary Tuesday nights and completely turning it on its head. And by my calculation, we still have 19,999,999,999 more, or 90.
Yeah, you're right, Matt.
7 more samples to go. So I'll be looking forward to the future with you all.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate that.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right. So final thoughts, Stu, Martin, anything you want to share before we wrap it up here?
No, we just really appreciate your time, and we appreciate your candor, and we appreciate your audience. And again, if you want to check it out, learn more about the company, bespokenspirits.com. All
right. Great. Well, guys, we appreciate it. And I mean, you can just tell from both of our reactions. Just I don't know how to say it. I mean, just very, very surprised, really pleasantly surprised. Great products, guys. And we really enjoyed getting the opportunity to talk to you both, and who you guys are, and why you got into this and what you're doing. So we really appreciate that, and I think our listeners will appreciate that as well very much. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. And I'm going to wrap it up. Well, I'm going to thank our sponsors, the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky. Thank them for sponsoring our show and all that they do, and they're making some great food out there. So visit those guys out there on the banks of Glens Creek in Millville, Kentucky, and then also 3 Chord Bourbon. We really appreciate their sponsorship as well. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.